All right, we'll jump right in here to parallelograms, which is the second lesson of Module 7 in our Revealed Geometry textbook. And I guess actually before I get started, as you're taking notes, this video is informational, and I'm trying to do my best to not eat up, a ton of your time. So I go a little bit quickly. So feel free to pause as it goes. And so first, what is a parallelogram? And so by definition, a parallelogram, and I'll highlight it here, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs, so I'm just going to highlight it, of opposite sides parallel. Right? And so, that's what these, and usually when I draw them kind of more as just those, but that's what those little arrow marks mean. Those little arrow marks mean parallel. And so I don't know anything about congruence or anything, I just know parallel. But if you remember, parallel has a lot of rules to go with angles, and so this is going to make a lot of rules. Parallelogram, now you can think of all kinds of different shapes. If it's got four sides and they're parallel, then, would a rectangle fit? Would a square fit? Yes, and we're going to get to those, but we're not there today. Today, we're just going to talk about parallelogram. Also notice here, the book uses this symbol, and so instead of writing out the word parallelogram, we are okay if you write this symbol out, and that symbol means that's a parallelogram. So you don't always have to write out the whole word, and that will be good as we move on. And these are the super important rules. All right. So these are the rules of parallelograms. And we're going to go over these. These are going to be important. There's a lot going on in this unit. And these 5 things we're going to keep going back to and back to and back to and back to. So, opposite sides are parallel. That's the definition. Opposite sides are congruent, which is awesome. And that's one of the theorems. Opposite angles are congruent. And I'll try to explain that in a minute. Consecutive angles add up to 180. That's what the word supplementary means. Supplementary means 180. It's important to know that. Put that in your notes if you don't already know that. Diagonals. Oops. Spelling's key. So I'm going to write diags for diagonals. Diags bisect each other. All right? So each diagonal is split up. Sometimes we'll have shapes where only one diagonal is split up. Here in a parallelogram, both diagonals split up, and bisect means split into 2 equal parts. Now, if I just draw a parallelogram here, it says opposite sides are parallel, so I can mark opposite sides parallel. Opposite sides congruent. Remember, I can mark congruent using a little tick mark. And so they're not the same number of tick marks, but they're congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. And so I can mark this angle up here is congruent to this angle down here. This angle right here is congruent to that angle right here. Consecutive angles are 180. And so these 2 angles add to 180. These 2 angles add to 180. But also these 2 angles add to 180. And these 2 angles add to 180. And then diagonals bisect means if I drew the diagonals in, they would split themselves into 2 equal parts. So now we're just going to use those rules. Example 1. Find CD. CD is right here. CD, if this is a parallelogram, and it would say on the book, it would say, shape A, B, C, D. So that would be what in the book it will actually just say this. It'll say parallelogram A, B, C, D. And so it's telling you it's a parallelogram. And so this side over here is 4, then CD down here is 4. All right. If it's a parallelogram, then B over here is congruent to C across from it. And so B is 45 degrees. AC is right here. All right. BD is right here. They're across from each other. They're opposites. Opposite sides congruent. And so AC is 1.5. Angle D is probably the trickiest one. All right. Angle D is right here. It is consecutive. And so for angle D, I have to actually do math. I have to do 180 supplementary, consecutive angle supplementary, minus 45. And so angle D equals 135 degrees. This is a proof. I don't know if you're coming from Edgenuity, how many proofs you did. We did some proofs in my class before. The first step of any proof is the given, and so I'm just going to write parallelogram HJKP. So that means the top there is a parallelogram, and parallelogram PKLM. And so both the top and the bottom are parallelograms, which means that all 5 of those rules apply to the top and the bottom. Now I want to talk about HJ and ML. In this parallelogram, HJ has to be the same as PK because opposite sides are congruent. And so I'm going to say that. So segment HJ has to be congruent to segment PK because opposite sides congruent. I'll mark those. And then in this parallelogram, PK and ML are opposite sides. And so I'm going to say that. PK has to be congruent to ML. Because again, what's my reason? Opposite sides of a parallelogram are congruent. Now, notice that the marks. If these two are equal and these two are equal, then they're all marked the same, which means that this top one and this bottom one have to be the same. Notice they're both equal to PK, so that means they have to be equal to each other. If I am as tall as somebody and that somebody is as tall as somebody else, then I, without ever meeting that person, know we're the same height. And so if HJ is equal to PK or congruent to PK and PK is congruent to ML, then segment HJ must be congruent to segment ML. And that property went over a whole bunch in first semester. It's called the transitive property. Also, since they're both equal to the same thing, you could see it as being plugged in. And so if you said substitution, that would not be marked wrong. So we got basically one example left. We're going to split up. Well, maybe 2 examples left. I can't remember now. But we're going to split them up and do them. I think there are 2 examples left. We're going to split example 3 into 2 parts. So find X. Let's find X first. Let's do X first, then we'll come back to Z. So X first. X is down here. ADC. Where the heck is ADC? ADC. Ooh. ADC. ADC is this angle. So that angle right there is 4X. DAB. DAB. Where's DAB? DAB. DAB is up there. So this angle up here is 2X. 2X minus 6. Now, are those angles across from each other? Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that one. Are those angles across from each other? No, they're consecutive. Consecutive angles. What's my rule for consecutive angles? Consecutive angles are supplementary. So do the math. Add 6 to both sides. I divide by 6. I get 31 degrees. Right? 6. Oh, sorry, I wrote that out wrong. Add 6 to both sides. I get 186. Divide by 6, I get 31 degrees. So that's x. Z. Z, this part of Z, this thing right here. Oh, this thing right here is for this part of a diagonal. This thing right here is for this part of diagonal. We know diagonals do what? Diagonals bisect each other. And so I want to say 3z minus 4 is equal to z plus 5. I'm going to first like to move the smaller z. So I'm going to minus z to both sides. I get 2z minus 4 equals 5. I'm just solving it now. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I get 2z equals 9. I divide by 2 on both sides. I get z equals 4.5. Where is the x? X is right here. X is on this side. Opposite sides are congruent. So I want to grab my calculator because I want to need it for this problem. Right? I want to set up 5x equals 27. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And so 27 divided by 5 is 5.4. The y's. The y's are right here and right here. They're on diagonals. So diagonals bisect each other. Bisect means splits into 2 equal parts. I minus the 1y over. I add the 5 over. I get y equals 9. The z's. The z's are very interesting here. I have to remember opposite sides are parallel. Parallel means alternate interior angles are congruent. Because parallel, that's one of the rules. Alternate interior angles congruent. And so 3z equals 33. I divide by 3 on both sides. Z equals 11. Your homework assignments in the workbook, page 417. Please submit it on Schoology.